Great. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm here in the Press Theatre at the Legislative Assembly on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Songhees and Esquimalt First Nations. We just wrapped up our weekly cabinet meeting. It was very productive, focusing on the issues that are important to British Columbians. Of course, addressing COVID-19 is always the top priority as we go through the agenda. We look at a range of issues, how we can help families, how we can ensure that the economy continues to be robust where it can be, and we focus on trying to stay open where possible. It's important, I think, for all British Columbians as we enter the middle part of February and look towards the spring that we continue to focus collectively on keeping each other safe. We've got Lunar New Year just ahead of us, which will be different than any other Lunar New Year we've ever experienced in the Lower Mainland. People will be celebrating the Year of the Ox, but they'll be doing it in different ways. We have Family Day just around the corner, oftentimes an opportunity for people to get together, to travel, to experience the beauty of British Columbia, perhaps even leave the province and go elsewhere. That's not what we're doing this year. This year we want you to stay close and tight with your family here in BC. We want you to stay close and focused on making sure that we get well together as we come through the pandemic. Our resiliency has been quite extraordinary. As a province of some 5 million people, the data shows that we have collectively done very, very well over the past 12 months. And I appreciate it doesn't feel that way for many British Columbians, particularly those who have seen family members lose their life as a result of COVID-19. To those who have seen their businesses rocked by the transformation of our communities as a result of pandemic protocols. All of us are in this together. Some of us are feeling more pain than others. And I think it's important as we come into Family Day that we reflect on that. Maybe the blessings that we have in our community and also the challenges that others have in theirs. That's what's kept us going together over the past number of months. That's what will keep us together as we await the arrival of more vaccines this week, next week, and then many, many more vials as we get into March, April, and May. As we get our immunization program up and running fully, when the federal government provides us with the vaccines that they're committed to, we're going to see changes in public health orders. We're going to be seeing changes in our daily lives. Let's look forward to those days, but let's not jump the gun. Let's make sure we focus on following public health orders until such time as it's safe to do otherwise. And with that, I'll ask Jen to monitor any questions you may have.
Reminder to media on the line, please press *1 to enter the queue. Our first question today comes from Katie DeRosa, Vancouver Sun.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my question. As you know, your Liberal colleagues have raised the issue of the meetings, cross-border meetings at Peace Arch Park, and Canadians and Americans meeting up there, up to 75 tents seen there, and wondering if you're going to ask Washington Governor Jay Inslee to have any action on that, or what can be done, especially given the presence of new variants, including the California variant.
Well, thanks for the question, Katie. And first of all, I didn't get to congratulate you on your appointment to the Vancouver Sun. Congratulations on that. With respect to Peace Arch Park, this has been an area of concern. I believe that the federal government is managing those issues as they should. The international borders are their responsibility. I do speak regularly with Governor Inslee. This is not an issue that we've discussed. We have discussed the challenges of residents of Point Roberts, U.S. citizens who must go through Canada to get to the United States. We've discussed a range of issues about our economy and how integrated we are, north-south, between British Columbia, Washington, Oregon, and California. And if we see persistent concerns around Peace Arch, I'll certainly raise that with the federal government, and they can take action with their counterparts in Washington, D.C. But this is not an area that's regulated by the states and the provinces, and I'm hopeful that those people who are coming together to see loved ones in that international space are doing so safely, and I'm confident. I've not seen any advice from Dr. Henry that this is a major issue. If that happens to be the case, we'll take action immediately.
Katie, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, thank you for that warm welcome. I appreciate that. As a follow-up, last week on Friday, Dr. Henry did say that the province is working with the federal government to increase screening at the U.S. border. So is there any progress on that? Are you pressuring the federal government to enhance screening, since a lot of the cross-border traffic, including essential travelers, including truck drivers, are not mandated to have the COVID test to come in? So what is being done between BC and the federal government on the border?
We are working with the federal government on the border, and we're very happy to see renewed enthusiasm from Ottawa on those issues, not just here in British Columbia, but more critically for case counts and infections, and of course the spring break on the horizon is the Ontario-Quebec borders. So I'm working regularly with Dominic LeBlanc, the Minister of Intergovernmental Relations, as well as the Prime Minister, on these issues. When it comes to Dr. Henry's advice and counsel to other colleagues across the country, particularly when it comes to keeping our supply chains open, and I know you appreciate by the way you put the question, we need to keep trucking active and ongoing to make sure we've got food in our stores and other essential goods coming from the U.S. into British Columbia. But that doesn't mean we relax our restrictions. It doesn't mean we relax public health orders. And Dr. Henry's working with her opposites across the country to reinforce that.
Our next question is from Binder Sajan, CTV.
Hi, Premier. We are learning that only 12% of people who've been fined for breaking quarantine or the group gatherings COVID law have actually paid their fines. And it looks like more than 50% are fighting the ticket in court, probably hoping that they'll be thrown out by a judge. Just wondering what your reaction to this is, and would you like to see more people face criminal justice rather than just being fined?
Well, I know that when it comes to these pop-up nightclubs, the one in Vancouver that was quite prominent, and another one, I believe, that's under investigation in Surrey, law enforcement has every intention of pressing charges. That will lead, of course, to court action. And I think that's appropriate. When people are deliberately disregarding the well-being of other British Columbians, we need to have more than just a slap on the wrist, more than just a fine. I'll leave those to law enforcement and to the Minister of Public Safety, Mike Farnworth, to manage and address, but I'm confident that we put in place a regime when it comes to public health and public safety that most British Columbians are following, and I think it's important, and I appreciate that the anomalies become newsworthy, but I think it's important that I take this opportunity to say that the overwhelming majority of British Columbians are rock solid when it comes to abiding by public health orders. And in fact, as you know, there are many people that are telling us we should go even further. We're trying to find that balance to make sure that people can continue to exercise their good judgment. But when that judgment becomes bad judgment, we have tools at our disposal to take action. We'll continue to do that.
Binder, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, and speaking of those who don't follow the rules, there are a couple of churches that continue to have in-person services, and I understand the province is seeking an injunction. Just wondering, how big of a worry is this for you, and are you worried that the relationship there between faith leaders and the province and public health has broken down?
No, not well. Certainly, in the case of those who have taken legal action against Dr. Henry and public health, well, that's the case you're talking about. That was not action by the province. That was a response to action by a small number of faith communities. The overwhelming majority of faith leaders and those who are people of faith across the province, whatever denomination they might be, whatever faith they practice, have been following the orders, sometimes reluctantly, to be sure. But we've talked regularly, Dr. Henry and Minister Dix and I think we've had at least a half a dozen large conferences with people of faith, faith leaders. We've set up a table for dialogue at the WASC Center with a facilitator to make sure that we're hearing clearly from those that are concerned about the long delays between people coming to gather together in person. And as we see our vaccination program take hold, as we see the case count continue to drop, I think we're going to be pleasantly surprised at how this collaboration and positive working relationship will lead to a more accelerated reduction of those public health orders. Dr. Henry's intimated to that as recently as last week. We're not out of the woods yet. As I say, we've got a dialogue set up at the WASC Center in Vancouver. We're engaging virtually with people all the time. There are a small group of people who believe that this is something that should be litigated. Dr. Henry, by seeking the injunction on advice from the Attorney General's ministry, was just following procedure. This was not something we initiated. It's a defensive posture. I believe that, as I say, the vast majority of people of faith understand and recognize that they have a responsibility to their loved ones and those that they don't even know to follow health orders to keep everybody safe.
Next question is from Justine Hunter, Globe and Mail.
Hi, Premier. I have a question that's actually not about COVID. You ended trophy hunting of grizzlies a few years back because of strong public opposition. I want to ask you about a different kind of recreational hunting. There's a big game hunter from Victoria who's killing wolves here on the island, and it looks like it's out in Soup. And she's announced on her Instagram feed that her goal is to trap and kill an entire pack. As far as I can tell, this is legal, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are if there's social license for that kind of hunting here on the island.
Well, I'm surprised that a constituent of mine would undertake such activity. This is not familiar to me, Justine. I've hearing this for the first time. I can't comment on the legality of it. I'm not familiar with what permits are required, what permits this individual may have. I can tell you that it would certainly be counter to the sentiment in the community when one lone wolf was relocated to the western part of my constituency and then shot by a hunter. The groundswell of frustration and anger at that single wolf kill was significant. I know that we as a province use the Wildlife Act to manage and protect caribou, for example, that are endangered species. We're required to protect them, and I get mail constantly prior to being Premier, mail about how people are passionate about wolves here in British Columbia, and so I would be surprised that there would be a lot of appetite, certainly in my community and indeed across the province, for the type of behavior that you've suggested to me. But I'm unfamiliar with it. I'll commit to you to take a look at it, and perhaps Jen can get back to you before your deadline.
Do you have a follow-up, Justine?
That sounds great. There actually is very little data on wolf populations. I'm just wondering if generally you think it would be a good idea for BC to have more detailed information before we allow. I mean, this is, as I understand, a legal hunt because there's no license required to hunt wolves specifically.
Sure, that's correct. I'm not sure that's correct. And again, the wolf populations on Vancouver Island are very small. There's been a recurrence of wolf populations in the Long Beach area. I know we hear tourists talking about that, but again, I'm not certain about the details. I'm sorry to cut your question off in full stream. I thought you might want to try another one, because I can't answer more than I've already answered on that one.
We'll follow up. Thank you.
Okay.
Next question is from Richard Zisman, Global.
Back to the Peace Arch Park. You know, you were mentioning that it's federal jurisdiction, but in the summer, the province did take action to close down the BC side of the park, citing at the time concerns around how busy it had gotten. So why not create an encouragement to do the same thing on the Washington side, considering we're now seeing tents? And there is significant concern with Valentine's Day coming up that we may potentially see an increase in the amount of traffic at the park.
Well, far be it from me to get in the way of those who love each other, Richard. But again, these are issues for the federal government to deal with. Dr. Henry has not raised it with me that it's a concern. If at the end of this press conference, I've got a voicemail from her that tells me otherwise, I'm happy to get back to you. But my sense is that we want to encourage people to have good behavior. And if the people who are coming to from the south to the U.S. side of Peace Arch, and they're meeting with their loved ones for brief visits. I'm reluctant to get in the way of that. If it is a bigger problem than I'm expecting, then I'm sure Dr. Henry will advise and we'll take action.
Do you have a follow-up, Richard?
As we look towards the beginning of March and mass vaccination plans for those 80 plus, do you have any concerns around reaching these people in communities, especially when it comes to those that potentially have language barriers or health issues? to get to local clinics? Like, is there any thought being given to going directly to those? We know that long-term care was a little bit easier because they all live in the same area. Do you have any concerns about going out in community to reach the 80-plus group?
Well, again, thank you for that question. We have been working on that diligently since December, when we got word that vaccines were on the way. We have within our government caucus a diverse group of people, multilingual, Punjabi, Cantonese, Mandarin, Filipino. Mabel Elmore can speak to Filipino residents of the Lower Mainland and across the province. So we're going to be using the talents we have within our caucus. I'll reach out to Shirley Bond and see if there are Liberals in her caucus that have multiple languages at their disposal. We're going to ask all members of the legislature to reach out to people they know to be in the cohort that we're looking for to start vaccinations, the 80 pluses. We're asking neighbors of people who are isolated, who may not have access to technology. If you know you've got an elderly person living next door to you, contact public health, take that step, be a good Samaritan, be a good neighbor, and all of us working together I'm hopeful, we'll see a positive vaccine rollout in the very, very near future. We were hoping to be well advanced at this point. Events beyond our control have put us back a little bit, but we have confidence that the commitments from the federal government for Pfizer vaccines this week and next week and beyond will get us on track, and we'll have a lot of work to do. And I'm confident that 2 months from now we're going to be asking for patience from the public. But for right now, I'm hoping that you'll contact your elderly neighbor, let he or she know that vaccines are on the way, and help them register, help them get to a clinic that will be well advertised. But any help people can offer will be gratefully received.
Next question is from Mary Griffin Check.
Oh, hi. Thank you so much for taking my call. I'm just following the story on the changes at the Royal BC Museum Premier, and the museum is not making anyone available today, but I did speak with Chief Don Tom from the Sartlet First Nation. And he says, in light of all the allegations that have come out regarding systemic racism, he wants the province to introduce legislation to address systemic racism against Indigenous people, because policy is not enough. It's not working. What are your thoughts?
Well, thank you, Mary, for the question. And as a born and raised Victorian, the Royal BC Museum is very important to me. I was very concerned when I heard allegations of racism within the museum. I understand that the board of the museum has met with the CEO, and they've come to agreement that Jack will depart later this month. And I wish him all the best and thank him for his service to BC. The board chair will be taking over as interim CEO. You will also know that I appointed Melanie Mark, the only Indigenous woman in the legislature, to be the minister responsible for the Royal BC Museum. And Melanie takes these issues, as you can well imagine, very seriously. She's working with the Public Service Agency to make sure that any of the allegations are fully followed up. And also, of course, with respect to Chief Tom's comments about legislation, we are working on legislation that we hope to introduce this year, anti-racism legislation, not just towards Indigenous peoples, but across the board. In addition to that, we have the the legislature has a standing committee looking at the Police Act specifically to update that document, some 50-year-old document, to better reflect the diversity in our community, to better reflect concerns about systemic racism across the piece. So we are taking action. We need to keep going. We need the public to understand that it's not good enough, and I've learned this, and all of us need to embrace the notion that we are all in this together, and we need to understand racism, and we need to bring forward legislation to ensure that we have anti-racism policies, not just tip our cap when we see it and condemn it, but to make sure we have policies and legislation in place to protect the diverse people of our great province.
Mary, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Thanks very much. Minister Mark, as you were saying, there is an investigation underway with the Public Service Agency, and I'm just wondering, when that report is complete, will it be made public, and do you have a timeline on that?
I have no timeline on the report, Mary. Certainly the findings will be made public. I know the board takes this very seriously, as do senior staff at the museum. Again, I was alarmed by the allegations and multiple allegations. Work's being done in that regard, and when we have more to say, I'm sure Minister Mark will lead that discussion. And again, I want to just reinforce that nobody takes this more seriously than Minister Mark, and I'm grateful that she is in place at this difficult time for not just the leadership, of course, at the museum, but all of those across British Columbia who look so fondly at the museum as a public asset, a real jewel for all British Columbians. We're working on a revitalization plan to modernize the facility. We're working with the federal government because we want Canada to understand that the artifacts and the archival materials and everything that's contained at the Royal BC Museum is a treasure for all Canadians, and we need to have a respectful workplace. We need to make sure that it's open to everyone to come free of fear of any persecution or any hints of racism. And Melanie will take that very seriously, and we'll talk to you when she can.
Our next question is from Lisa Yuzda, News 1130.
Hi there, Premier. Speaker here, sorry. Just following up a little bit on the churches and fines not being paid and churches going to court. I'm just wondering what your concern is of the cost to taxpayers, the cost of court time of all of these things being battled in court and the lawyers required for that.
Well, I would prefer that not be the case, but not just people, but organizations have every right to proceed to legal action if they feel that's their only recourse. We're confident that the public health orders that have been put in place by Dr. Henry and the emergency orders that we put in place are constitutional. We have the ability to do this. We're protecting the public interest. There are a small group of people that disagree with that. I want to reiterate, the faith community, leadership in the faith community have been stellar across the board. This is very difficult for people who congregate weekly, sometimes many times in a week, to celebrate their faith, whatever it might be. And nobody wants to get in the way of that, but we're in a global pandemic, and I want to just pay tribute to those who have been abiding by the rules, abiding by the public health orders, not just in the faith community, but across the board. People have made extraordinary sacrifices, and we should never diminish that. But we're not out of the woods yet, and if there are those that feel that the courts are the best course of action for them, they have every right to do that. I disagree, and we'll have that. They'll have their day in court, and I will continue to thank the many, many thousands of British Columbians who are abiding by the rules because they know it's in their, not just their interest and their family's interest, but British Columbia's interest as well.
Do you have a follow-up, Lisa?
Yes, regarding ski hills, we received a document yesterday that some of the ski communities have put together, I guess essentially trying to combat COVID cases that we've seen there. And I'm wondering what your concerns is with the ski hills. I don't know if you've seen this document, if you think the ski hills are doing enough to combat any ski communities, to combat the après-ski activities that are leading to cases spreading.
Well, firstly, it's not the activity of skiing that's the problem. That is perhaps among the safest things you can do with your mask on and your helmet on, swooshing down the hill, clearing your head, getting physical activity, being emotionally recharged. The challenge is after you come down the hill, what do you do from there? We're encouraging people, and have been for some time now, enjoy your day on the hill, the closest hill you can get to from home, and then go home. The après-ski activity is where we're seeing an increase in cases. In some jurisdictions, border towns like Fernie, for example, the case counts are way down. Skiing continues to take place. People are making better choices. So I want to applaud not just the ski hill sector, not just that industry, but all industries who have taken steps to put in place action plans so they can continue to operate, whether it's restaurants, whether it's the salon sector, whether it's construction, whether it's manufacturing, whatever we do in British Columbia, business owners, workers have taken steps to put in place action plans so they can continue to operate, they can continue to get a wage, continue to put food on their table. And the ski hill industry is doing just that, and I commend them for it. The trick now is that once you've had your ski, go home. It's as simple as that. And if we can reduce the transmission that's happening off the Hill, I think we'll be in a much better place. And as the weeks go by, the next 10 weeks, Minister Dix and I are both very, very concerned about, as we ramp up vaccinations, as we see better weather, people will start to relax and let down their guard. This is not the time to do that. We need to keep at it, people. We've been successful. It doesn't feel that way for many people, I know, but as a province, we're doing way better than others, and we need to keep focused on that.
Our next question is from Tom Fletcher, Black Press.
Hi, Premier. Another non-COVID question for you. Salmon farms in the Discovery Islands, they got the green light from fisheries and oceans scientists as recommended by the Cohen Commission, but they are shutting down anyway. Your government initiated this. Is this the right outcome?
We didn't initiate the discovery issues. We were focused on the Broughton. We put in place a process, as you know, Tom, to bring industry, workers, communities, Indigenous peoples together and put in place a plan that would see a slow reduction in open net pens in the Broughton Archipelago. It was widely lauded by environmentalists, by Indigenous peoples, by business. The federal government took action in discovery without consulting us at all. They told us after the fact. We have asked the federal government what their plan is to mitigate the job loss, for example. I know the local MLA, Michelle Babchuk, has been very active on this, working with Minister Callon. We want to make sure as we transition from one industry to another that there are programs in place to help workers. That, in this case, is the responsibility of the federal government, and they need to step up. I've made that clear to them, and we're working on that. Minister Callon is in correspondence with the industry minister in Ottawa, as well as the fisheries minister, and we're hopeful that we can come up with a resolution that meets the needs of workers, the businesses there, Indigenous peoples, and as well as those who are passionate about wild salmon, as I am.
Do you have a follow-up, Tom?
Yes, thank you. Well, the federal minister has indicated that this was for reconciliation. Isn't this an example of the Indigenous veto that is implied by the UN declaration?
Well, again, a good question, Tom. The federal government has not yet passed a Declaration Act as we have here. We did that at the same time we were sitting down with industry, with First Nations, with communities, with workers to find a way forward that met everybody's needs. The federal government didn't do that. If the federal minister is saying that this is a start towards reconciliation, I'd have to respectfully disagree. We need everybody together to find a way forward. That's been what we've done with respect to fish farming. That's what we've done with respect to the Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. We have led the way in Canada. If Canada wants to follow us, that's great, but it's not a one-step process. It's a multiple-step process, and we're confident that the programs that we have in place will protect workers. We're confident that our commitment to wild salmon, unprecedented expenditures by a provincial government in an area of federal responsibility, because salmon don't know jurisdictions. They don't know borders. They know that they go up the river and then their offspring come down the river, and they've been doing that for millennia, and we want that to continue to happen. So I think that we need to do all of these things at the same time. It's not easy, it's difficult, but nobody said that it would be a walk in the park, or everyone would have already done it by now.
Next question is from Rob Buffum, CTV Vancouver Island.
Oh, thank you for taking my question. Premier, I'm hoping to get your reaction to the head of Destination Greater Victoria yesterday was critical of the federal government's decision to cancel the whole cruise ship season without first considering or embracing technologies like rapid testing. What's your reaction to that?
Well, certainly we're all working on getting more comfort and confidence in rapid testing. Dr. Henry is working with a whole host of pilots. We're taking advantage of the abundance of rapid tests we have available, but there are a good number of false positives and also false negatives as a result of those tests, and that's been a concern of ours from the beginning. With respect to the cruise ship industry, I know that this is a big blow for Victoria, parts of Vancouver, and even up island and beyond into Prince Rupert and Alaska, but I'm confident if you talk to the vast majority of people in Victoria, they would be hailing this decision. We are not comfortable as a community to welcome the world back to British Columbia until the world gets their act together when it comes to COVID-19. And having assurances that thousands and thousands and thousands of people will be disgorging at Ogden Point and waving around a rapid test that may or may not be accurate is probably not going to meet the test of the vast majority of Victorians. And I appreciate the disappointment of those who depend on the cruise ship industry, but we're not at that stage yet. And I'll have to leave it to the federal government to, again, as I've said a couple times today, manage the international borders. I was very, very anxious for them to do so 12 months ago, and I'm grateful that they're continuing to do that.
Do you have a follow-up, Rob?
I do. I'm wondering in relation to, we've talked about the fact that as more vaccines get rolled out, life will gradually get back to normal for businesses and the rest of us. But with no cruise ship season through to 2022, there are businesses that rely on that foot traffic. And when things like the federal rent and wage subsidies are perhaps pulled back or ended come the summer, is there any contemplation of giving specific relief to tourism businesses that won't have those subsidies perhaps and will be hit by the double whammy of not having that foot traffic from the cruise ships? Is that something specifically your government would consider giving extra subsidies to those tourism businesses?
Well, yeah, we are working on that. The Tourism Association has been meeting with Minister Mark and meeting with Minister Kalon about how we can continue to help not just those small businesses, but large businesses like Butchart Gardens, who depend on a lot of foot traffic to employ a lot of people. These major attractions are not eligible for some of the small business grants that we have on the table. So we're looking at how we can help these larger businesses that are almost solely dependent on international travelers and the visitor economy. I want to see that come back as quickly as possible, but I know the vast majority of British Columbians will disagree with that until such time as there's evidence that the world, not just Washington State and people going to Peace Arch Park, but the world has got their act together here. And we all want that to happen as quickly as possible, whether you're in the tourism business or not. I would want, the Coho Ferry hasn't run for almost a year, and it had one unscheduled stop in 60 years before that. And the number of people that get off the Coho every day and stay here for a long period of time has had a far greater impact on businesses than those that have a 3-hour, 4-hour, 5-hour stop at the cruise ship terminal. So there are a whole host of other tourism opportunities that we need to explore, and I'll leave it to the federal government to answer for why they've moved it all the way to 2022. That was their decision, not ours. We are certainly grateful that they're focused on keeping our borders secure until such time as we see positive outcomes around the world.
We have time for one last question, and that's going to come from Rafferty Baker, CBC Today.
Hi, Premier. Do you have any plans to delay or postpone spring break because of the current state of the COVID pandemic in BC? And what are you asking of people of this province and other provinces this spring break that's different from last year?
Well, no, we have no plans to amend the spring break. As you'll know, British Columbia has tried to keep, when it comes to school-aged children, we're trying to keep a sense of normalcy when it comes to our K-12 system. When spring break arrives, our advice will be, as it has been for months and months and months, stay close to home, try and stay within known bubbles, don't go engaging in reckless behavior, do your level best to stay safe, keep other people safe around you. That's the plan at the moment. I know other jurisdictions who don't have the same opportunities for good weather as we do here in BC are worried about what will happen at spring break when people in, say, Quebec and Ontario normally would migrate in large numbers to Florida and South Carolina. We don't have that concern here. People will probably be pretty happy to stay in British Columbia and take advantage of the many opportunities they have here.
Rafferty, do you have a follow-up?
And Prime Minister Trudeau again this morning mentioned that it's the responsibility of provinces to implement their own border restrictions. Any specific restrictions that would be put in place in BC for that spring break period?
See, what you mean, internal borders, you mean? Internal borders?
Yes.
Yeah. Not at this time. We have staff working on various plans and protocols that we could put in place. We don't want to be caught short there. We have been working with various officials, those that we used to shore up the federal government back last March and April by putting provincial government workers at various border points across the U.S. border. We're looking at those plans, but we have no plan at this point to implement them. But we are preparing. And again, I've talked to premiers across the country, and I encourage them, as I encourage the Prime Minister, to tell people to stay where they are. If you don't need to be coming to British Columbia, you shouldn't come to British Columbia. We will welcome you when the pandemic has subsided, but you're not welcome today. And it pains me to say that, but the best course of action is for people to stay where they are. And that's what I'm asking British Columbians to do, and I hope that the premiers of other provinces will say the same thing to their citizens. And the federal government, the Prime Minister, has been saying that for a couple of weeks now. If you don't have to travel, don't travel. And that holds firm well through spring break.
Thank you, everyone. That's all the time we have.